Hello friends, welcome back to another episode of Hello Friends. I'm your host Kyle. This is our Mr. Robot review show, episode 24, The Perfect Kind of Crazy. I think it was the last episode where Mr. Robot told Krista that, everyone knows sexy is crazy, or crazy is sexy, excuse me. We get the perfect kind of crazy here, and man, what an episode. So just kicking it off here for The Plot is an Illusion. We start off, we're actually the night of the 5-9 hack. So we know Elliot spent season 2 in prison. What's really, really awesome about this whole episode is that we get to see, look back, take a kind of a flashback in time, and we get to see all of the events that happened outside of Elliot's time in prison. So, we got to see Elliot's perspective, and now we're going back and we're, kind of filling in all the gaps. And so, questions that we had before are starting to be answered in this episode. This is really, really awesome. So it starts off the 5-9 hack. We're back in the F Society arcade, which is always fun to see. It's just Elliot and Tyrell, and they're talking about how it feels like something came alive, which is some foreshadowing that we're gonna stay spoiler free for. But Tyrell's kind of freaking out. Elliot goes over to the popcorn machine, takes the gun out of the popcorn machine, which we know he stored in there. And of course, at this point, we know that Tyrell ends up eventually shooting Elliot with that same gun. So this is an amazing scene because Elliot goes over to the popcorn machine, then he comes out as Mr. Robot. And so there's really cool cinematography there. Tyrell, of course, at this point is wondering what's going on, and he kind of turns on Tyrell. We don't really know why, but he just puts the gun on Tyrell, and he's like, Tyrell's like, what are you doing? He's like, no, this is our plan, it's God's plan or whatever for us to work together. And there's an amazing sequence where Mr. Robot holds the gun to Tyrell's forehead, and he's like, no, we'll let fate decide. And then he actually pulls the trigger. Mr. Robot pulls the trigger. We later find out at the end of the episode that the gun was jammed, or the barrel was jammed. And then Irving actually tells Tyrell that, I took care of that for you. So he's like, that would have blown your head clean off. He's like, but don't worry, next shot will work. We actually find out that the next shot is Tyrell shooting Elliot. And of course, he misses all the major organs somehow. So that's crazy within itself. I don't want to jump around too much here. But yeah, Elliot, he's like, let fate decide. He holds it to his head. He's freaking out. The music is building. It's really intense. But Tyrell's kind of like, man, I can't believe you pulled the trigger. And so we've seen that Elliot is kind of like the protagonist. Mr. Robot is not really an antagonist, but he is the crazy one who will, he wants to do stage 2. He doesn't care about killing the innocent people. Mr. Robot is the one that's going to pull the trigger. But as we have found out at this point in the series, Elliot and Mr. Robot are the same person. It's just the split personalities that are working there. So all really cool stuff. Then Irving shows up. Tyrell Wellick's SUV is outside the arcade, and Bobby Cannavale's Irving is always great. But he shows up as Dark Army with his 2 henchmen, and he's like, hey, we're going to go in there. I'm going to do the monologue. He's like, if they want to be heroic, he's like, pull out your gun. But he's like, let's try and keep this clean. Irving comes in there, and he's like, you must be Tyrell Wellick. And he's like, yeah, you guys are seeing me because you messed up. And they're like, what's going on? And he's like, look, Tyrell, you're coming with me. He's like, Elliot, you need to take Tyrell's SUV. He's like, give me the keys. He's like, take the SUV to this address, leave in the parking lot, put this under the dashboard. And he's like, make sure no one sees you. So this answers the question where, if you guys remember, when Elliot wakes up in Tyrell's SUV and he's wondering what's going on, the parking guy comes over and he's like, man, you've been here forever. You got to pay. We had no idea what's going on, and Elliot woke up in his SUV. Well, now we found out why that happened, because it was Elliot the whole time, but it was Mr. Robot's persona that was controlling that, and he actually is the one who drove the car, so he followed the Dark Army's instructions, but then he switches back to Elliot, and Elliot's wondering what the hell's going on, why am I in Tyrell Wellick's SUV? So that's awesome for us, because we find out kind of the missing piece as to why that happened. And of course, we knew Tyrell Wellick was missing. Well, now we've kind of connected that puzzle piece as well, where it's Tyrell Wellick was taken by the Dark Army. They go to a cabin, a nice isolated cabin. I think Irving says they have like 37 acres of land or something, and he's like, there's cameras and everything. He's like, don't worry. He's like, if you want to be safe, don't leave the property. And then like most of the episode focuses on like this great sequence where Tyrell gets yoked, where he's like staying there. He grows a beard. He like is chopping. Irving shows him how to chop wood. He's like, this is balance. You got to get yourself centered. And he gets like ripped. It's really, really cool to see Tyrell Wellick in this episode kind of go from like confident but then scared. He like really breaks down. Martin Wallstrom's acting is so good in this episode where he's like, I don't want to skip over a scene we're going to touch on in a second there, but he really like breaks down and then builds back up. And we kind of see the return of Tyrell Wellick at the end of this episode. But once he does get to the cabin, there's a sequence there where I didn't get the actor's name, but he's got like a whispery or whiskery beard. Really, really good. I think he's a famous actor. I'll edit in the video because he's phenomenal. But he basically is like a contact for Dark Army. They're trusting the loyalty for Tyrell Wellick. So he comes in and he's like, hey, you know, Mr. Wellick. He's like, sit down. I have some things to ask you. And he's like, the first question he says, did you murder Sharon Knowles? And he's like, what is this? He just says, did you murder Sharon Knowles? And he goes, no. And then he goes to the next one, like, do you love your wife? Have you cheated on your wife? He's like, will you be loyal to me? And like it's like very clear interrogation tactics. It's almost like waterboarding because it's like they have the tea in the background and that's like making the whistling sound. So it's like, it adds tension. The music is building obviously, but Tyrell is like, he just keeps asking the same questions rapid fire. And then Tyrell's answers slowly change from no to yes. And then he asks him, Tyrell's like full on crying, and this is great acting by Martin. But he actually asks him like, will you be loyal to me? And he says no. And then he like collapses to the table, and the Dark Army contact like comes in. They're watching like He-Man or something, like on the TV. But he comes in without his mask, which I thought was kind of weird. But that might have been a different dude. But he comes in and he like looks at him, and the guy's like basically signaling like, no, he's not ready, or like this isn't gonna work. And then Tyrell says, but I will always be loyal to Elliot. And they're like, oh. He's like, that. Why didn't you say so, man? So it's like they got Tyrell, and then they tell them like, look, this is stage 2. It's called Red Wheelbarrow. That was Mr. Alderson's request, which we find out. And basically like this is, we know that the stage 2 attack, like, which is, as we know, Mr. Robot's plan and not Elliot's plan, but Elliot is Mr. Robot. So if you're confused at now, go back and watch the first 22 episodes. But amazingly enough, the pieces are all starting to come together, and we are starting to have less of like what the hell's going on and more of like, oh, okay, so this is what stage 2 is. This is what happened when Elliot was in prison. Like, these are what the characters did. Really, really cool stuff. We get a really cool flashback, kind of a bittersweet flashback with Darlene and Cisco. And, you know, he's like, do you ever just, like, she gives him the router or whatever that we actually find out is given to Tyrell Wellick to, like, do his work and write the code or whatever on the stage 2 attack. And so Cisco has a moment, which is, like, probably their last known moment together before the shootout, where he's like, you ever just, like, not want to do this shit? He's like, you ever just want to run away and go to, like, Budapest? And, you know, she's like, I knew we should have never slept together. And she's like, I'm kidding. But she's like, you know what? Maybe after when this is over, we can talk about that. And which is sad, obviously, because we know Cisco's fate at this point. So Cisco wanted to bail and wanted to go out. And obviously he was killed by Dark Army. We do also get an amazing scene after that where Cisco delivers, he goes right from that, he takes the router and he delivers it to Irving in a car. And he's like, man, I just want to let you know, he's like, she has protection, you do not. He's like, if things go bad, like, he's like, don't get attached to her. And he gets kind of pissed off and walks away, but it's like, Irving tried to tell him, like, man, she's just a job. Like, but like, we are going to protect her to protect Elliot over you. So like, it really, like, he's disposable, which we find out, like, obviously he meets his untimely fate, but that's all really cool. We also get a great sequence after Tyrell gets yoked and he grows a beard, which is really cool. I love. I didn't know this all happened in one episode. I remembered this part, but I thought it was over a couple episodes. But it's really, really cool because Tyrell really gets to the cabin. he gets ripped. He's seeing all these like tabloids where it says like Joanna Wellach has a side man. He sees the divorce papers. There is a scene that I think I ran over or skipped over. We get a quick shot with Minister Zhang, and basically they tell Elliot like he's in prison, and they're like, why did he go to prison? And they're like, he stole the victim's dog or whatever, and BD Wong is laughing, or Mr. Zhang is laughing, and they're on like this amazing like deserted island. The guy says, the guy, I think his name's Cody, he does like the news show or whatever, he kind of like controls the media. He comes to visit them like a 4-hour plane ride, and then the guy's like, hey, we have to go to New York in like 20 minutes. And he's like, dude, why couldn't you call me? Like, and we get the watch beep, and we know that like Mr. Zhang and White Rose, like they are very particular on time, and they like, yeah, could he have called him? But he's like, you know what? It's a power move to be like, you're flying out to me. He's like, I couldn't even find this place in Google Maps, but he's like, hey, I need you to like make sure that F Society is in a positive light, and make sure Tyrell Wellach is also in a positive light. So like basically Dark Army is paying off the media to make it appear well. So that's really cool because it shows you just how powerful Dark Army is, and they're willing to pay off like people to be seen in a positive light. And then if there's a jab at Trump, of course, because he's like, I also need you to back one candidate for me. And there's like a video of Trump, and the guy's like, this guy is like, he's a buffoon. And I was like, we're not going to get into that because we're not going to get political here, but I know Sam Esmail hates Trump, so that was like a very obvious jab at him. But yeah, and then we have a sequence. So there is sort of a continued sequence where Tyrell is chopping wood. He's there's like a baby cam, so he gets to at least see his baby, but it's kind of like sad for him. We do get a really quick sequence too, where he actually calls the Bonsoir Elliot scene from Tyrell's sequence here. But he's like, Elliot sounds weird. He's like, what's going on? They don't tell him that Elliot's in prison yet. So he's kind of like, Tyrell, he's agitated. He doesn't want to work with Dark Army. Eventually he like runs away. The music, I just want to shout out to the score and the music. First of all, this episode is like action packed. It's like fast paced, where it's like there's not a single minute wasted in this episode. It's like, but the score and the cinematography for every single scene, every second of this episode, and it's a longer one. I think it's like 56 minutes. Nothing is wasted. Everything is intentional. It's like, man, and that's the case for Mr. Robot throughout the series, but for this one in particular, like every score hit, where I was like, man, this is great. Like I had chills like the whole episode, because I was like, every single set had something important, and we had so many questions answered, and it's like, man, it's crazy. But Tyrell does decide to run away, so he puts on, because there's no like security basically. There's a couple henchmen, but basically he's left alone for the most part, because like Irving says, there's security cameras and everything, and Tyrell probably should have remembered that, but he thinks he can just basically run away. He basically is like, screw this, I'm gonna go. So he puts on sunglasses, puts on the hat. He's got a beard, so he doesn't really look like Tyrell Wellach. But he starts walking, although they speed it up, but he goes like through the woods, and then he comes to like a convenience store. But I don't think anything's like remotely close, so he would have had to walk a long ways. But there's a sheriff there's a local sheriff, and Tyrell like kind of looks down, and he's like, oh shit. And the guy recognizes Tyrell. But Tyrell's wearing a hat and sunglasses, and he's got a beard, and he's bigger, like physically bigger. So like, I don't know how the cop would have possibly recognized him, but he puts the lights on, and Tyrell starts sprinting away. And I'm like, well, dude, don't run away from the cops. Like, if you were just acting like you were on a walk, then you probably would have been good. So there's like kind of a weird scene where he runs through the woods. He comes to like a crossroads kind of, where he's like a dirt path looking either way. The cop car is like on the dirt path. I don't even know how he got back there, but the cop takes him in, and he's like, wow, I can't believe it's really you. Tyrell's got handcuffs on the back, and then he actually, it's gross, but he like actually breaks his own thumb so that he can slide the handcuffs off. But he basically calls in the FBI. The FBI shows up. It's actually Dark Army. And then this is where we get confirmed Santiago is working for Dark Army, because he kills the cop. He shows up, and then they go back to the cabin. He freaks out. He's like, I didn't want to kill a fucking cop today. We had suspicions that Santiago was working with Dark Army. I didn't want to say anything. I knew, because I remembered. But that's why I've been hinting in the past for like he's always acting sketchy. Dom has been on their trail the whole time, and every time she gets closer, he's like, no, don't worry about that. And it's like it's very obvious now rewatching it. But this is like the first time where it's confirmed like Santiago is working with Dark Army. They had to kill a cop, and he's like, what happens if they reported it to like the bigger branch or whatever? He's like freaking out, and Irving's like, you know what? He's like, it wasn't a good day for us, but he's like, we're just doing the best we can. And like, it's really cool because Santiago's kind of running his mouth, but Irving, even though he's like a subtle character and he's like what you think is like a really nice guy and like composed, he's like he's very dangerous. Where it's like he's got that calm intensity where it's like he's gonna act normal, he's gonna have funny lines, and he's gonna have some comedic relief. We find out that Tyrell Wellick, when he's like he doesn't want to work with them anymore. He basically he's depressed, and he's like, I should be spending time with Elliot. He's frustrated. He gives him back the router. We find out that Irving is like a man of deception because he doesn't have any kids, at least I don't think. But he tells Tyrell Wellick the story about he's like, my boys, like basically he uses Tyrell's family against him, where he's like, to relate to him, he's like, I had my boys, my wife took that, she took the kids, they were everything I had. He's like, I chopped a bunch of wood just like you did. But he's like, I realized I needed my boys in my life. He's like, I'm gonna go home to my kids and they're gonna give me a big hug. At the end of the episode, we find out that he was lying. He actually goes home and like goes in his recliner, pops up his laptop, and he's writing his book, A Wink That Went Wrong or something. And he's like, meaty hands, and he's like, yeah. So that's a funny bit. But basically, because we have a quick scene too where Irving tells the guy at the car repair shop or whatever, I think it's Irving Auto, which is probably like a front for the Dark Army, similar to like Red Wheelbarrow. He tells him like, I got this #1 dad mug or whatever, and he's like, you're not even a dad. He's like, I know, but like it makes you relate to some schmuck. He's like now they think I'm a good guy, and they like that's how you make the sale. And so that's what he did with Tyrell Wellick. He doesn't have kids, and he doesn't have a wife, and he tells Tyrell like, I'm gonna go home to my kids tonight. And it's like that's when Tyrell kind of listens, and he feels for him because he thinks he lost his kids when it's like he doesn't have any kids. So that's all really awesome. But he's like, hey, there's a quick scene with sorry, I feel like I'm really like jumping all over the map here. And speaking of the map, we do get a cool sequence too where Tyrell puts up a map and he's like pinpointing all the different locations. So I think those are the paper records that are being moved to the New York facility. Or he's just pinpointing like which, I don't know if he's like redirecting the E-Corp paper records probably to the New York facility, or if he's seeing like which ones have done it. I think it's probably a little bit of both, but Tyrell just put up a literal map there. But we do get a quick scene of Irving going to see Joey Badass or Leon in prison. And he's like, hey, how'd it go? And he's like, oh man. And he's like, I love killing neo-Nazis. He's like, it felt pretty good. He's like, no, I'm not talking about that. He's like, I'm talking about Elliot. How did Elliot go? And he's like, oh, it's good. He got like the transfer paperwork. He should be out soon. And he's like, cool. So basically Dark Army bailed out Elliot there. And he tells Tyrell, he's like, hey, Elliot's getting released. It's time to go. And Elliot's like, and it's really, really cool because it's like, he walks over with the, Tyrell is shirtless. He walks over with the axe and he tells him he's being released. And as soon as he says that, he drops the axe and he's got a big smile on his face. And he's like, I need to look my best for him. And so then, as much as I like the beard, as you can see, I was kind of sad to see that Tyrell is like, he got rid of the beard. There's only one episode beard. So like there's a sequence where he shaves, he cleans up, and they move him back to the city, and he's like, hey, I need my suit. And Irving's like, dude, we talked about this. He's like, you shouldn't put the suit on because like this isn't the middle of nowhere, this is the city. So he's like, if you put that suit on, people are gonna recognize you, and if like you're the most wanted man right now. And he's like, it's non-negotiable. And Irving's trying to talk him out of it, and he's just like staring at his suit, like in awe. And it's just like the music's playing, and it's like he suits up, man. We get it, like he's looking out the window, and he gets a call that like Elliot's like out in the street. And then this is cool because we get a different perspective of Elliot getting into the cab, where they told him to like go to the cab, and he's like, are you Elliot? And he's like, how do you know my name? Well, Tyrell's actually looking down, and then Tyrell is in the building. He goes down, he goes on the other side. and that's how he tells him the address, and he's like, okay, we got to be really careful now. And it's like Tyrell Wellick is back, baby, and he's yoked, and you just think like he was broken down, he was like lost. I feel like he lost everything. He was crying, and he's back. He's back in the suit. You know, he had some time to balance, and now he knows like what's important. And the end of the episode could have just ended right there, and I was like, bravo, man, bravo. But then we do get a quick sequence where it cuts to like Elliot being worked on. It looks like a hospital. They're like, it's a really gross scene where it's like his intestines and they pull the bullet out. But then it turns out it's just the same area where Tyrell shot him, and he's telling Angela like he needs to go to a hospital, and Angela's like, no, they're in good care. And then it's weird because like Angela is now really involved with Dark Army too, and she kind of felt like an outsider before, but now she's just like cold stoned Angela. So shout out to Portia Doubleday for that acting performance too. She's only in it for like 2 minutes, but Tyrell's freaking out. As we know, he managed to miss all the vital organs, and he cried and called Angela right away. How he knew to call Angela, I don't know, but maybe he was told beforehand, like, hey, if anything goes wrong, call Angela. But they're working on Elliot. They're like, hey, he's gonna be okay. And Tyrell's freaking out. He's like, man, he told me that like I wasn't real, and he's like, but how is that possible? I was standing right in front of him. He's like, it's almost as if I was a different person, or he was a different person. And she's like, oh, Elliot. Or excuse me, she's like, oh, Tyrell. She's like, you need to sit down. She's like, there's something you need to know about Elliot. She's like, he can be a different person. And she basically reveals that Mr. Robot is his alter ego. And that like makes him think way differently. So now Tyrell knows Elliot's back, and like how is that going to change their relationship? We'll see. But now is the trust completely gone? Because, you know, poor Tyrell is so loyal to Elliot, and he thought of him as like a god. And in the beginning of the episode, like Mr. Robot was willing to kill Tyrell. And like Irving says, if the gun or the barrel didn't jam, like it would have blown his brains out. So Mr. Robot like had decided to kill Tyrell Wellick. And like, so maybe that's probably why Tyrell was feeling a little pissed off. He's like, look, this guy tried to kill me. I got to kill him before he does that. He was angry. But Irving told him like he fixed the gun, so the next shot is the one that Tyrell shoots into Elliot. But then he, you know, obviously Tyrell kind of realizes that like, what have I done? Like I can't. I love Elliot. Why did I shoot at him? But so yeah, that's all crazy. But man, it's like Elliot's in like the bed, and Angela's looking at him, and he wakes up, and then right before it cuts to black, it like glitches and cuts to Mr. Robot, and so it's like, whew, man, what an episode. So we'll go right into the score here, guys. This is the easiest one for me. The series probably. This is a 10 out of 10. This is the best episode of the series so far. 100% for me. And I've loved a lot of episodes in this series. Like, you know, I've given 9 7s, 9 8s. I think I've given a 10 already in season 1, but it's like, this is the best episode of Mr. Robot to date. So season 3, episode 3, man, it is just like leagues above like anything, like, because it like ties so much together. But you also get the cinematography, you get outstanding acting. The White Rose is really hard to pick this week. We'll get into that in a second. But like, man, you find out all the missing pieces. You know, the show is great because it builds up all these theories and these mysteries. And like for years, like I remember like all of us fans were like wondering like, you know, is Elliot Tyrell? Is this happening? Like, what's happening? Why did this happen? And it's like, you finally start to like see Sam like reward us a little bit. We're saying like, oh, well, this is how the SUV got there. Well, this is what happened. Well, this is when Tyrell found this out. Well, this is why they don't have a trust. This is where it happened to Tyrell. This is where he went. Like, all of the things where season 2, when we were following Elliot, and Elliot's like, where's Tyrell? Why is Tyrell missing? Like, now we know why. Because he was in the cabin because Dark Army took him because they had to clean everything up. And they wanted to do stage 2 as well. So, yeah, awesome stuff. I mean, again, like I said, the cinematography, the score, this is a perfect episode. I think there's really like nothing outside of Tyrell kind of like running when he should have known that like he wasn't going to escape. Although I think at that point he was just kind of like, look, I'm held hostage here. I got nothing to lose. He's like, I'm just going to try just running and just see if I can just escape. Even though Irving did tell him there's security cameras and everything everywhere. So that's why they were able to get him so quickly. But yeah, I mean, this is a 10 out of 10, a perfect episode. The score, the acting, the cinematography, the stakes, the questions answered. It's the best episode of Mr. Robot to date. Okay, guys, for the White Rose Award for this one, like I said, this one was really tough. There's a lot of really good acting. We get almost no Elliot in this episode, which is rare. So almost no Rami. We get very little Christian Slater as Mr. Robot. It's a heavy dose of Tyrell Wellick. It's a heavy dose of Irving. We get a little Cisco, a little Darlene. But for me, guys, this is Tyrell Wellick's episode from start to finish. Martin Wallstrom has got to get the White Rose for me. He just does such a great job. It's like, he's such a fascinating character, and because we were missing him for so much, I think all of season 2, if not most of it, we didn't know where he was, and like, it's funny that they answered in one episode, but like, it's so well done that it really does. I thought this was multiple episodes that he was at the cabin, but it really is just like one like 45-minute sequence where like time passes. There's a great montage, but like just Martin Wallstrom's ability and his acting chops, like they just stick out so much, where it's like every scene and every dialogue throughout the episode, but especially for Tyrell, like you hang on to it because it's so good. And it's like, man, he's just got such intensity. I mean, I always think back to that scene in, I think, season 1, where it's like the third or fourth episode, where he's like in the mirror and he's like, you will be the next CTO, and he's like slapping himself and he's like adjusting his tie in the mirror, and then he adjusted his tie like 55 times in the last scene, or one of the last scenes in this episode. It's like, man, he embodies that character, and he does such a great job. And it's like he was broken down to like a farmer. And the interrogation scene in this one too, the guy does ask him like, are you afraid to be like your father, or do you hate your father? And he says yes to both. And then I was thinking, like, I don't think we know Tyrell Wellick's father, or like, I don't know if we get any of that. And so much of the series is focused on Elliot and his father, and like, you know, how like whether there was an accident or whether he was pushed out the window, or like, you know, his dad dying, and then like Angela's mom dying too. It's like parents play such a huge role in the series, and Tyrell has been always kind of nuts, but we don't know why. And now it's like, oh, he hated his father, and then he said like he chopped a bunch of wood when he was little, and Irving's like, why did you stop? And he's like, because I hated it. And it's like, oh. So like, I wonder if his dad just put him to work all the time, or like it was just very like dismissive, or didn't love him, or whatever. And it's like, that would explain a lot of like the like personality defects that he has, and the reason why he just breaks down. He's so emotionally unstable most of the time, where like, you know, when he kills Sharon, or where he breaks down, the guy's asking him all the questions, and it's like, man, Martin Wallstrom just, he is Tyrell Wellick, and it's hard to see him like in any other role now, but he's just a perfect. I think the Mr. Robot cast, I've said this before, but the Mr. Robot cast, I think, is like perfect. I think every single character that they picked is just like the perfect role for them, or like between Cisco and Darlene and Mr. Robot and Elliot and like Tyrell and Irving, it's like, it seems like they just like plug in these characters, and it's like, that is that character. It's like, it's the perfect casting between like, whether it's the actor, the actress, like the intensity, like, man, it's just crazy. But I think Martin sticks out the most in this one, because this is Tyrell Wellick's episode, and we don't get too many of those, so it's always special when we see him. But yeah, he's just another level in this one. All right, guys, well, that's it. As you can tell, this one's probably a little bit longer. I had a blast watching this one. Like I said, I'm going to stick by 3 episodes into season 3 now. This is the best episode of the series, and there are some really good episodes, and there's great ones to come. So the final episode, I might do like maybe like a quick ranking, or like just maybe like my top 5 episodes. We'll see. I don't know if we're going to do that, but yeah, this one I think is the one to beat right now. So yeah, we got 7 episodes left in season 3. Season 3 is already like just killing it, and again, the first 2 seasons were really good too. Season 2 is the down season. Yeah, season 2 is phenomenal too, if you've been watching these reviews. So like, but this one really is like next level, and so I kind of remember some things that are coming up, so I'm really excited to get to those. But for the most part, this is only my second time rewatching, so a lot of it I don't remember. So I'm excited to keep this journey going, guys. Thank you so much for joining, for checking out the channel. Like, comment, subscribe. Subscription numbers have been like going up. So super excited about that. We did just change the YouTube URL finally, since we are over 100 subs. We're like well over 100 now. So now you can find any of the content youtube.com/c/Project Potter. Really, really nice. Thank you guys so much for all of the love, kind, and support. I really, really appreciate it. Without you guys, I couldn't do this, or I wouldn't do this. So, yeah, thanks for joining, guys. Like I said, like, comment, subscribe, check out the other episodes, check out the other content on the channel. And until next time, guys, goodbye, friend.